Good evening. Please come in and take your seats. We're going to start here in just a couple minutes. I need more gain on this mic, please. Turn this mic up. Turn this mic up. We need more gain on this mic. Louder. Please come in and take your seats. Louder, please. Boy, this is a rebellious group we have here tonight. We're going to have to calm you down with some Beethoven. Maybe that'll help. We still got some back in the back there that need to come in and take your seats. We have just a few logistical announcements here. Brian, going to make those?
Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian Root. I'm the deacon here at Sovereign Grace Bible Church. We're very glad that you've come out for this wonderful concert from Sam Rotman to give glory to God for his talent in music. One thing I'd like to, a couple things to point out, restrooms are in the building next to us, off to the east, to stage right, or stage left, whatever that is, this way, wherever I'm pointing. We'd like to, in case a lot of people come in, we want to make sure that we fill in from the middle out, so if you have an empty seat to your right, if you can scoot over one, that would be great, so that we can have people come in throughout the concert and without disturbing the concert. That would be fabulous. Afterwards, there is a time of refreshment. We would encourage you all to join us in our fellowship hall behind us here. You get a chance to meet Sam Rotman himself. There are CDs for sale in the back as well. And we just ask that you silence all your cell phones. I'm going to do that right now with you right here so that we don't disturb the concert. Okay, there you go. Silent. And let's see, what else? I think that was about it. Oh, yes. We are going to be taking an offering. It's a free will offering to Sam for the concert. There's no cost involved. You can give or don't worry about it if you don't have anything. But if you have something to donate to him, that'd be great. It's whatever you'd like. And it will all go directly to him, I think. And if you're going to write a check, write your check out to him. Or if you have a credit card, just sign the back of your credit card, Sam Rotman. Okay? Great. There we go.
Let's pray. Lord, we are grateful for who you are, and we see your glory and all the things that you made. We see you as the greatest of all artists and musicians and engineers, and all of these things, Lord, reflect your image. We thank you that you created us to reflect your image, and may we think of this tonight. You've given us the gift of music, and we want to both play and hear to your glory here tonight. We pray in Christ's name. Amen. Sam?
Well, I've done a lot of concerts, but I never heard anyone say, give me a credit card and put my name on it, you know. Oh, no, that would not be safe. That would not be good. Well, what a group. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for the church. I think this is my fourth time I've been here, maybe my fifth, but I've been here, this is at least my fourth. And so I'm very happy to be here and to share with you. And so a couple of things. The program's about an hour and a half. So you know how long we're here, 7:30. And it's classical music. It's not hymn arrangements. It's our gospel music, and it's classical music. I'm going to introduce the pieces, and everybody should have a program. So does anyone not have a program? Who does not have a program? Okay, we need somebody here. Some people need a program. So we just want to make sure, because I'm going to be telling you things that are in the program that I think you could enjoy it and know more about it. So I think there's some people in the back here. He comes in. He's coming right in here. And to give you some of the programs. Here we are. And then here is someone. Okay, no, I'd rather, over here I think is someone that needs a program. Ma'am, did you have your hand up? Oh, I thought, you need a program here? Okay, up here? Good, yeah, no, here's a program. Good. Okay, great. Over here, some programs. Okay, good. Okay, great. So the program is kind of unique. It's all the music of Beethoven, my favorite composer. I play everybody. I play from Bach all the way to Prokofiev, Russian composer, from 1620 all to 1950. But this is all Beethoven. And I'm going soon, in a couple of weeks, actually, to Germany in a celebration of his birthday. He was born December 16th. So I'm doing concerts actually in the town where he was born, Bonn, Germany, giving a concert of all Beethoven on his birthday. So I'm doing a whole tour of concerts, and so this is lots of the music that I'm going to be playing as well. So I'm going to refer to it. I'm going to play these 3 major pieces by Beethoven, then share my story, my life story, how music's not the most important thing in my life. And then the last piece is very short, only about 5 minutes long. The last 4th piece, which you see there, is these variations. So let's start. Look at your program. The first piece on the program is the first piece Beethoven ever wrote for the piano. The first piece. He was 25 years old. He was a wonderful pianist. He had given concerts of Mozart and Bach and other composers. They knew he wrote, and so this was his first piece. He just turned 25. It was December, late December of 1795. And in 1 hour, in that concert, he played this and some other pieces. But in this piece, he changed the course of music forever. Nobody had ever written music this dramatic or intense. Music to many people was entertainment. It was the emperor decided to hire Mozart to write something while he was having tea. He was having a delegation and he wanted some background music. Beethoven said, "My music is not background music. It is the power of the human soul." And so he showed us that, how he brought this drama and creativity and intensity of the power of emotions into the music. So it's in 4 parts if you look at your program. The first part is lively. That's what allegro means. The second part is slow. To me, the most beautiful part and the most profound part is the second part. The third part is a little dance, minuet trio. And the 4th part is very fast. And so there are these 4 parts of the piece. If you look at it, look who it's dedicated to. It's dedicated to a man named Franz Joseph Haydn. Franz Joseph Haydn was a very powerful, important composer. He was about 24 years older than Beethoven, and for a while he taught Beethoven in his early 20s, was when Beethoven was in his early 20s. And so he acknowledges him. He says he was known as Papa Haydn, sort of the elder statesman of the composers of Schubert and Mozart and others. So he acknowledges him. You taught me for a while, you guided me, and so I honor you, Franz Joseph Haydn, with dedicating this first piece for the piano in 4 parts. So this is the first piece for the piano by Beethoven. Thank you. Well, 18 months after Beethoven played this piece, something happened to Beethoven that would change his life forever. And that is, he began to go deaf. He began to lose his hearing. He began to have ringing in his right ear, and then ringing in his left ear. And he went to see some doctors who basically gave him horns, the funnel of the sound. But that didn't help very much. And then Beethoven began this long descent for about 5¼ years into becoming totally deaf. Eventually, the ringing began to go away, and he thought, oh, good, I'm being cured, but the ringing was going away because his hearing was going away. So I've been asked for decades, how can a man write music if he can't hear it? And I'll show you how. You don't need to hear music with your ears to hear music in your head. So I'm going to sing for you the Star-Spangled Banner. So I'm going to sing it. You don't sing it, I sing it. Oh, Jose. Do you hear the Star-Spangled Banner? You sure do. You hear it in your head. So you see, you don't need to hear music with your ears to hear music. You can hear it in your head. Right now, let's all hear Amazing Grace. Everyone knows Amazing Grace. Listen. I hear Amazing Grace. But this is the big difference. This is why Beethoven's a genius and we're a speck of dust with air pumped in us. You know the Star-Spangled Banner because you've heard the Star-Spangled Banner. Beethoven heard music that nobody ever heard. And I have a book called Beethoven in His Own Words, which is writings from his letters that he wrote and his diary that he kept. And a man wrote to him and he says, Herr Beethoven, how do you get the musical ideas in your mind? And he says, the music has been given to me by the Almighty, and I am just putting it down on paper for him. Now you have to understand that is a very, very humble statement. God gives me the music. I have some ink and a white piece of paper, and I put some dots and dashes on a piece of paper. And 250 years later, Sam Rotman hears this music, and he weeps uncontrollably because it's so beautiful. So I share all of that because the next piece on your program, Beethoven wrote while he was going deaf. So that's the reason for this introduction. This was near the end of this 5-year period of going into total deafness. And it's called the pathetique. The word pathos is a Greek word which means suffering. Suffering. It doesn't mean emotions, it means suffering. That's where we get the passion of Christ, the suffering of Christ. The pathos de Christi in the Greek, the suffering of Christ. And Beethoven was going through suffering. He was losing his hearing. How do I write music and I cannot hear it? And in the first 30 seconds, you'll hear these chords, and it's absolute. In German, the word is Angst. Angst is absolute pain, suffering. And this is these chords of suffering and angst. The piece is very fast, very agitated, actually, very nervous. And when you see my right hand going over my left hand, you'll all be able to see it. When you see that, this is Beethoven talking to himself. Imagine he's all alone for 5 years. I mean, meaning, he's alone in bed, he's alone going to sleep, he's alone in his study. And how do I write music if I can? Can you imagine the conversations he had with himself? To navigate this suffering. So this is him talking to himself. So it's between these notes of these moments of this suffering, pain, and then this agitation. The second movement, you would think would be full of more suffering and sadness. And you know what it is? It is absolute peace and tranquility. It's actually as Beethoven has accepted this. It is one of the most, if not the most beautiful piece Beethoven ever wrote. I have friends of mine who believe this second part is the most beautiful piece Beethoven ever wrote of all the music he ever wrote. That's a big statement. And it's absolute peace. Absolute peace. It should be absolute turmoil, and it's the total opposite. The third movement, again, has a stress to it. Very fast, very brilliant. And at the end of the piece, Beethoven is hitting the piano with his fist. Now, it's not literally his fist, but he's hitting the piano. It's going to be these chords. You'll hear that. And it's these chords. I'll accentuate it so you'll know this is the part at the very end. Beethoven's hitting the piano because he wants to hear a sound, and he can't hear anything. He's beating the piano to hear something, and he can't hear it. So this is a very important piece to Beethoven. I played for you Sonata number 1. This is now Sonata number 8, the Pathetique. And notice who it's dedicated to, a man you've never heard of, I'm sure, but it's Prince Karl von Lichnowsky. Who was this man? This man was Polish. He was a nobleman, a prince, a wealthy man, and he loved classical music. He loved classical music. And he had a palace in Vienna. And every Friday, the prince put on concerts for the people of Vienna to come to his palace and hear. And if you were anybody in Vienna, you came to his concert. And if you were somebody who wrote music in Vienna, you were on his program. And you know who was on every Friday program? Beethoven. This man saw that Beethoven was going to be Beethoven. And he had him on every program. And so he thanks him, Prince Lichnowsky. You opened up my music to the people of Vienna and to the people of Austria and to Europe. And it's purported that when Beethoven died, he was the most famous man in all of Europe. Now, that's quite a statement. 20,000 people traveled to Vienna for the funeral of Beethoven. Now, you have to, this is 1827, horse and buggy. You know, this is no trains, no. People came from Paris, people came from Prague. They had to delay his funeral because they heard of all these people coming to Vienna. It was actually a holiday. They closed the entire city because of the funeral of Ludwig van Beethoven. And so that's how famous he was, how legendary. He was probably the most legendary man to realize how legendary he was while he was still alive, which is very special sometimes. Mozart had no idea how, people knew nothing of Mozart. Bach had almost nothing published, and now these are the giants of classical music. But Beethoven, they realized. So this is the Pathetique in 3 parts by Beethoven. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I told you the first piece you heard was Sonata number 1. Then you heard Sonata number 8. And Beethoven ended up writing 32 sonatas. It's 855 pages of piano music. Look what it did to me. I put in all those notes. They actually call it the Old Testament of piano music. They do. This 850 massive amount of music. And so the next piece you're hearing on your program is number 26. Do you see that? Number 26. This is many years later. This is decades later. Beethoven has been deaf for a long, long time. He is very famous. He is very well known. He is very successful. And the secret of the piece is who it's dedicated to. So look at your program again. It's dedicated to a man named the Archduke Rudolf Reiner. Who was this man? This man was the son of the Emperor of Austria. He was called Leopold II. So I've always given this example, but I got to change it. I used to always say, everyone knows who Prince Charles is, right? Prince Charles is the son of Queen Elizabeth II. We all know Prince Charles. Well, now he's King Charles III, right? So this is the same idea. Prince Charles is the son of Queen Elizabeth. This man, the Archduke, is the son of the Emperor. And his title was the Archduke. He was much younger than Beethoven, and he saw that Beethoven was Beethoven. And this is what he said to Beethoven. Beethoven, you write music and I'll pay all your bills. It's very simple. Don't teach. Don't go to a university. Beethoven was thinking of moving to Paris at one point. And at one point, he was invited to be the music director of a city in Germany. Now, Beethoven was from Bonn, Germany, but he went to Vienna because that was the epicenter of classical music with Mozart, Schubert, Haydn. And he was invited to go back to Germany. He said, no, don't go. You write. And we have to thank this man for giving us this volume, this massive volume of the music of Beethoven. So what happened was, in May of 1809, a man named Napoleon, you've heard of him? He's the emperor of France. He invades Austria. And Leopold, the emperor, decides for security reasons to take his family and the government from Vienna for protection. And Beethoven pleads with him, and he says, please don't go, please don't go. And this piece is called, look at your program, the Lebewohl Sonata. Lebewohl is the German word for goodbye. You see it says farewell. Do you see the word farewell? This is the farewell sonata. So actually, I speak German. There's two ways of saying goodbye in German. One is Auf Wiedersehen. Everyone knows that. And that literally means after again, I'll see you. Auf, wieder, again, sehen, to see. After again, I'll see you. Lebewohl is the word you use when you never expect to see the person again. A final goodbye, the Lebewohl. And Beethoven was convinced this is the Lebewohl. And Beethoven did something he never did in any other piece. He actually, over the first three notes, when I play these first three notes, they're very slow, he wrote the word Lebewohl over the first three notes. And you're going to hear these three notes throughout the piece. These three descending, sometimes in my right hand, sometimes in the left hand, sometimes they're almost on top of each other. And this is the farewell, the farewell. The piece is slow, and then it gets very fast. And when it gets fast, my right hand is Beethoven, my left hand is the Archduke, and they're yelling at each other. I mean, it's a human argument. You can hear literally like chatter. Beethoven says something, the Archduke answers. Beethoven says something, the Archduke answers. And then at the very end of the piece, you can actually hear the horses on the cobblestone streets taking the carriage of the Archduke out of Vienna. And my right hand goes to the top of the piano, my left hand goes to the bottom of the piano, and Beethoven writes them a physical separation, an emotional separation, and a musical separation. It's absolutely magical. Now, you may say, well, of course he didn't want him to leave. He was paying all of his bills, not for 10 years. Beethoven said to him, Rudolph, I don't need your money, I need your friendship. And this man helped Beethoven a lot, a lot. Beethoven had tremendous turmoil from his deafness, from insecurities of he thought, people were talking about him. And, he just had a number of issues. And this man helped Beethoven, did things for him, negotiated for him, many, many things. And this is what he was to him, a friend that stuck closer than a brother. The second part, look at it, it's actually called The Absence. Beethoven wrote this while the Archduke was gone. And this is something interesting, I share this with you. Beethoven used to take walks every day in the parks in Vienna. And when there's sketches of him, and he always walked like this. He always had his back, his hands, and the wrist of his right hand was always in the hand of his left hand. So he's always like this. And he would walk very slowly, and then a musical idea would come to him, and he would stop, and then he would write this music idea on his sketchbook. So he had these sketchbooks with all this music that he said, the Almighty has given to me. And twice in this slow movement, you'll hear a stop. And my right hand is all by itself. You see, my right hand was Beethoven, the left. Beethoven twice writes music just for the right hand. I'm all alone. I'm all alone. And I stop. And he's thinking not to write something, but he's mourning the loss of his friend, the farewell. On January 30th, 1810, 9 months later, the Archduke came back to Vienna. And boy, you'll hear it. It's an explosion of 2,000 notes in 10 seconds. It is almost, that's an exaggeration. No one can write 2,000 notes. But it is an explosion of Beethoven runs to him. You can see them embracing each other. They're talking to each other. Of course, Beethoven was deaf, and so he couldn't read lips, so he writes things, and he answers him. He writes things, he answers him. Now, there's two things, again, in the third movement I want to share. My father was born in Eastern Europe, in Romania. My mother was born in Eastern Europe, in Czechoslovakia. In fact, my mother was from a city called Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia, which was 2 hours from Vienna. And so I remember as a little boy, 7, 8 years old, when my parents came to the United States, my parents had a lot of friends from Russia, Romania, other Jews, and from Hungary, and they would take walks together in the mall or in the park, and there would be another couple, a husband and wife. And my father always walked with his other male friend, and my mother would always walk with the husband, the wife of the couple. And my father always locked arms with his male friend. They didn't hold hands, of course. They locked arms. I remember vividly seeing how, and my mother did the same. They locked arms. And when I went to Vienna for the first time in 1973, I remember seeing for the first time in real time how in Eastern Europe, it's very common for two women to lock arms. And you can see Beethoven and the Archduke locking arms. It's clear as the tradition of that friendship does that I saw with my family. So, very special piece. Of course, it's dedicated to the Archduke. In fact, let me share this. 14 of the greatest pieces Beethoven ever wrote, 14 are dedicated to this one man. Nobody ever got more than one dedication from Beethoven, but this Archduke had 14 pieces dedicated to him. And then after this piece, I'm going to share my story. And then the last piece is 5 minutes long, very short. So this is the number 26 by Beethoven. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, before I play the last piece, very short, I'd like to take a few minutes and share about myself. My story really begins with my parents. My father was born in Eastern Europe, as I mentioned, in Romania in 1905. My mother was born in Eastern Europe. At that time, the country was called Czechoslovakia. She was born there in 1915, so my parents were 10 years difference in age. And they were both very religious Orthodox Jews. So the Orthodox Jews are the strictest Jews that adhere to the Jewish faith. Very committed, very religious. And my parents left Europe in 1940 because of one person. His name was Adolf Hitler. If my parents stayed in Europe, they both would have been murdered. Everyone that stayed was murdered. 11 months after my father left Romania, the Nazis came to his part of Romania, eastern Romania. They gathered 10,000 Jews and over a 2-week period systematically murdered all 10,000. 2 of them were my grandparents. My father had a sister that was taken to a concentration camp and never heard from again. So my parents had to get out of Europe. Like a lot of Jews, they ended up in South America. There were a few countries that had an immigration because they had heard about the persecution of the Jews. And one of them was a small country right on the equator called Ecuador. And they lived from 1940 to 1950 in Quito, Ecuador. My brother was born there. My sister was born there. In the spring of 1950, my mother was pregnant with me, and my father wanted to bring his family to the United States. He filled out paperwork and was given permission to come to the United States. They came through New York City, and I was born 5 months later in October of 1950. And as you can imagine, I was raised in a very, very religious Jewish home. My grandparents died for being Jewish. My parents suffered for being Jewish, and I was instilled with everything possible with my Jewish heritage. I was sent to public school during the day, and then I went to school in the synagogue, and it was called Hebrew school. So there are Catholic schools, there are some Protestant schools, there are a few, not many, but there are some Jewish schools. I heard one down the block here on Bethany Home Road. So I went to Hebrew school. I learned Hebrew. I learned all about being Jewish. I learned hundreds of prayers, and I went to Hebrew school 5 days a week for 8 years. So this was a very, very big part of my life. All my friends were Jewish. All my relatives were Jewish. I started Hebrew school when I was 8 until I was 16. So you can imagine all those formidable years, what an impact it had upon me. I remember I'd pray in the morning for a half an hour in Hebrew, and then I went to school, and something unusual happened. It sounds funny now, but it was not funny at the time. But as I was growing older, 11, 12 years old, I began to develop a very foul mouth. I could curse very easily. I could lie to my teachers. I could lie to my parents. I was very religious in the synagogue, and these prayers meant a lot to me. I mean, this was important to me. And I realized it was easy to be religious. And then an hour later, I'm in school, and I'm swearing and cursing and lying, and that was easy, sadly. It was easy for me to be religious when I had to, and it was easy for me to be a sinner when I wanted to. Sad. I was good at both. Then when I was 17, I went to the famous music school in New York City. I was accepted there, the Juilliard School of Music. I was there for 5 years and got a bachelor's and a master's in piano. And there I met 3 students who called themselves born-again Christians. Well, I had no idea what that meant. I never heard that. But there was something very different about these students. Every time I saw one of them in the cafeteria having lunch, I saw another one taking a break from practicing. They were always reading the Bible. The Bible. I mean, this is not a school of religion. This is a school of music. And these were highly respected students in the school, very talented. And when they got together, all they did was talk about Jesus. Jesus did this, and Jesus said this, And what did Jesus mean when he said this? Why did Jesus do this? They never talked about church. I had no idea what church they were involved. Nothing about church. Nothing about the C word, Christianity. It was always Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus. Yeshua in Hebrew. Well, they heard I was a religious Jew, and they basically asked me two questions. They asked me if I ever read the New Testament. And I told them, nope. Not a word. I was told the New Testament was not a Jewish book. You would never find a New Testament in our home, so I had no idea what was in it. I never saw one. I never read one. I never touched one. Zero knowledge. Zero. Nothing. They asked me, well, have you ever thought if Jesus could be the Messiah? I said, no, no, no. In Hebrew, it's Mashiach. The Jews are waiting for the Messiah. And I said, no, no, Jesus is not the salvation for Jewish people. But again, I was very moral. You know, I didn't want to do anything to hurt my parents. My parents almost died for me. They sacrificed for me. I didn't want to shame them, so I never drank alcohol. To this day, I still don't know what a beer tastes like. Never been drunk. Never took drugs. Now, I lived in New York City. Some of you will relate to this. I lived in New York City from 1968 to 1973. That was the height of the Vietnam War. That was the height of the hippie movement. These hippies were this group of people that said you can have all the drugs you want and all the sex you want and maybe you'll find some happiness. Well, I can only tell you this. If you lived in New York City when I was there were drugs everywhere. Everywhere. It's not what drugs you wanted, it's how much drugs you wanted. I never took it. Never. Never had premarital sex. But even though I was so moral on the outside, no sex, no drugs, no drinking, my friend, I'm going to tell you, I was very, very, very immoral. Immoral. You know where? Right here. Listen to me. I knew I was not on the inside the way I could appear on the outside. I could do many, many Jewish things, but it never affected me on the inside. I was very moral. I was very religious, but not changed. Not changed. I was the same foul-mouthed, dirty-minded, self-centered, egotistical person at 20, at 18, at 16, at 14. Nothing changed except I was getting older. Nothing changed about me. I had the same problems, the same issues, the same sins. So I made a big decision. I said, well, if I want to know about this person, Jesus Christ, I'm going to read this book, the New Testament. Now, let me tell you, that was a big step for a Jew, to read the New Testament. And I didn't want to talk to a rabbi or a priest or a minister. I'm going to read this book myself. I don't want anyone to tell me. Now, when I was a student at Juilliard, I used to practice for 10 hours a day. Now, let me tell you, that's not a lie, and that's not an exaggeration. I did not sit at the piano for 9 hours and 45 minutes. I sat every day at the piano for 10 full hours. I never left Juilliard until I practiced 10 hours. I started to read the New Testament, and my whole life came to a stop. I was shocked. I was shocked when I read this book. For the first time in my life since I started piano as a 9-year-old boy, I completely stopped practicing. They gave me a little pocket New Testament. And they said, well, Sam, if you read this book, start in this book called The Gospel of John. Never heard of it. So I get the book out, which they gave. I look at it. Oh, sure enough, there it is. Gospel of John. So here is a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the light of the world. Wow. Are you kidding me? Wow. You know, when a Jew reads, someone says something like that, someone else talks about light. In the first book of the Bible, Bereshis, in Hebrew, God said, let there be light. And this Jesus says, I am the light. Here is a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the bread of life. Here's a man, Jesus, who said, nobody comes to God my Father except through me. He that has the Son of God, Jesus, has life. He that does not have the Son of God, Jesus, does not have life. I am the vine, you are the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. No, no, no. Without God, I can do nothing. No. Without me, you can do nothing. Sam, you want to know God? You want to serve God? You want to follow God? You want to serve God? You love me. You follow me. You love me and obey me. You believe in God. You believe also in me. There's no difference. Well, you know, we're in a beautiful church here. Let me tell you what I said to myself. Pardon me if you can. I appreciate, don't laugh, because it was not a funny moment. It was a traumatic moment. I said, this man Jesus is a lunatic. Now this is incomprehensible. This is over the top. Moses never said words like this. Abraham, the father of the Jews, never said words like this. I was shocked at what Jesus kept saying about who he was. Well, I said, I'm going to throw away this book. I remember the garbage can. I'm going to throw away this book. I'm going to go practice. And at that second, I said to myself, if this Jesus is who he says he is, now let me repeat that again. If this Jesus is who he says he is, who are you, Jesus? You want to know who I am, Sam? I am the light of the world. If he is who he says he is, I may be making the biggest mistake of my life throwing this book away. I better listen to him. And then Jesus said he came for sinners. I was not a sinner. I was very moral. I was very religious. I spent my whole life looking good for God. I was on God's side. But Jesus said he came to bring forgiveness. And he said he came to change us on the inside. He called it a new heart, a new life, a new birth, a spiritual heart, a spiritual life, a spiritual birth. Well, I've played concerts in 61 different countries. You name a country, I've been there. I think I've played in every country in Asia except North Korea. I've been all through South America, every country in Europe. I've been to Cuba twice. I went to Cuba when you couldn't go to Cuba. I've done 28 concerts, 2 tours of concerts of 14 each in Cuba. And let me tell you what I've learned. Let me tell you. My friend, I don't care if your skin color is blue, pink, red, black, brown, yellow, white. There is no difference because of the color of your skin. Zero. I don't care if you're a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Christian, a Muslim. There is no difference. None. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Communist Party, Socialist Party, Labor Party. None. My friend, I don't care what language you speak. I don't care what culture you're from, because I'm telling you this reality. This is the reality. Every person in this world, 7.5 billion people, and every person in this room, we are experts at hiding things. Hiding things. Hiding things. You know what's the first thing man did when he disobeyed God? The first thing he did, he hid. He hid. And we have figured out a billion ways of how to hide things from people and God. You can hide things from your husband. You can hide things from your wife. You can hide things from your friends. You can hide things from your parents. You can hide things from your children. You can hide things from someone at work. But nobody hides anything from Jesus Christ. Nobody. Not from this Jesus. In fact, he said, every word you say is going to be accounted on the day of judgment. We're going to give an account of the motive of our hearts. There is a DVD of your entire life, externally and internally. And listen to me carefully. I mean this with all sincerity, that even though I was so moral and so religious, I thought I was clever enough with my tongue and I was crafty enough with my mind that I, Sam Rotman, nobody could do it like Sam Rotman. I could hide things from people and God. And on May 21st, 1971, 51 years ago, for the first time, I prayed to this Jesus. And I'm going to tell you what I said. My name is Sam Rotman, and Jesus, I want you to take over my life. I want you to tell me what to do, and I will not tell you what to do. I told Jesus the lies I said. I told Jesus the immoral words I said. I told Jesus the dirty thoughts I had. I decided two things. I'm not going to hide anything from Jesus. You know something? You don't need to hide anything from Jesus because you're not hiding anything. And I decided I'm not going to make any excuses. Now listen to me carefully. Do you realize you can come to Jesus Christ and you do not need to give him an excuse for anything you've ever done in your life? In fact, if you give him an excuse, you're mucking it up. You're making it complicated. You're really it's not complicated. We make it complicated. I finished praying. I opened up my eyes. And in a billionth of a second, I knew that Jesus Christ completely transformed me on the inside. I'm telling you, I had a dirty, filthy mouth. I could pray hundreds of Jewish prayers, and a second later, the most vile things could come out. And instantly, Jesus cleaned it. I was shocked I stopped cursing. I'm going to tell you this. And I remember about 3 minutes later that I realized I couldn't form a curse word with my lips if I wanted to. I had a dirty, filthy mind, and instantly he cleaned it and changed it. And the next morning, the first thing I did is that I read about Jesus Christ, and I thanked him, and I thanked him, and I thanked him, and I couldn't wait for 8 o'clock to come, because that's when Juilliard opened, and I was always there at 8 o'clock when the doors opened to go practice. I remember I couldn't wait for 8 o'clock to come, and I went to every practice room, and I told every Jewish friend of mine at Juilliard, I met the Messiah, and his name is Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. I told every Jewish friend. I've played over 3,200 concerts, and I can tell you that all of my concerts are nothing. You know how much nothing is? 3,200 concerts are nothing compared to having Jesus Christ. The greatest thing I ever did in my life, the most important thing I ever did in my life, was to give my life to Jesus Christ. Music is not the most important thing in my life. Jesus Christ, because listen, my friend, listen, young person, only Jesus Christ can transform your heart. Listen, your wife can't change you. Your husband can't change you. Your parents can't change you. Your children can't change you. The church cannot change you. The government cannot change you. Let me tell you something. You cannot change you. You know who the hardest person to live with is? Yourself. But let me tell you, listen. I don't mean this to be cute or funny. This is the miracle in this world. Being cured of cancer is like a miracle, but this is the miracle in this world. The miracle in this world is that Jesus Christ transforms the human heart. That's mind-boggling. That is absolutely mind-boggling. And he's done it to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of people over the last 2,000 years, and I'm one of them. Little me, I'm one. You know why I was Jewish? I was born Jewish. That's the only reason I was Jewish. If I was born in Egypt, I'd be a Muslim. If I was born in India where I've done concerts, I'd be a Buddhist. If I was done in Thailand where I've done concerts, I'd be, no, that's a Buddhist, that's a Hindu in India, a Hindu. I'd be a Buddhist. It's not a religion, my friend, it's a person. It's a person, the central person of human history. Every time you write 2022, you're acknowledging Jesus Christ is the central person of human history. He is this gift to the world. Can I tell you something on the side? I'll be down here in a minute. You know what's the first thing you see when you walk into a synagogue? Any synagogue, conservative, reformed, orthodox, there are all these branches of Judaism. You will always see the same thing, the 10 Commandments. In every synagogue, you will always see, this is the law that God gave to the Jewish people. The gift to this world, the Jewish law. You know what's the first thing when you walk into a church? You know what I call it? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Imagine the first thing you see in a synagogue is the law, and the first thing you see in the church is, and every time you see that cross, God's telling you, I've made a way to forgive you. Why don't you come to me and let me forgive you? Why don't you come and experience the amazing miracle of being forgiven and made new. Salvation is not what you will ever do for Jesus Christ. Salvation is everything that Jesus Christ has done for you. Nothing in my hands I bring, simply to Jesus Christ and his cross I cling. And I play the piano for him. Jesus gave me the ears to hear the music, the fingers to play the music, the mind to learn the music, the heart to love the music. You know that Jesus has never missed one of my concerts. I know it sounds very cute. You can laugh. It's very real. And every time I give a concert in a church, a big hall in Europe, at a college or university or with an orchestra, he's in the front row. And every time I sit down to play, he says, Sam, I'm looking forward to hearing you play for me this evening. Listen, my friend. I say this with all my heart. If I could look into your eyes, every one of you, young person, child, senior, it is worth living for Jesus Christ. Listen, listen. This is no joke. He's not a joke. He's not a curse word. He's not a phantom. He's not even a nice Christmas story. He is the life and the light of the world. Don't let anything become an excuse to keep you from the amazing life there is in Jesus Christ. Listen, don't let anything become an excuse. Your past can disappoint you. Christians can disappoint you. A church can they're not worth it. He's worth it. And you can say like I did. Listen to me. Listen to me. You can say like I did. My name. Tell him your name. My name, Jesus. And I want you to take over my life. And he will. And I want you to forgive me. And he will. And I want you to be with me. And I want you to guide me. And he will, and he will, and he will, and he will. Music gives me a lot of happiness, but not one note of music will ever change me. I'll play 40,000 notes tonight at this concert. Some of these pages by Beethoven are really black with a lot of notes. 40,000, not one note will change me. Jesus Christ changed me, transformed me, gave me a new life. My friend, it's worth living for him. Last piece. We'll be done in 5 minutes. Look at your program. The last piece. This is a famous piece that you've all heard. I can guarantee you've all heard this piece. You know that the second I start it, you're going to say, I know that. It's called the Turkish March. Very famous piece. Beethoven heard this march, by some street musicians in Vienna when he still could hear, and he wrote it down in a book. And 20 years later, he writes this piece. So when you've heard this piece in different forms, this is the original. This is how Beethoven gave it to the world, and other people have modified it. So you'll hear this march, very famous march, and then there are these 6 little variations, and each variation is a different mood, and then at the end, you'll hear the march again. It's very short. It's 5 minutes long. Now notice who it's dedicated to. This is very interesting. It's dedicated to a man named Franz Oliva. You know who Franz Oliva was? He was Beethoven's accountant. He was his tax man. He was the man that took care for 20 years. Can you imagine knowing the great Beethoven on such a level of taking care of all of his finances for 20 years? And so he said to him, Franz, you've served me all these years. I'm going to dedicate this little happy piece to you. So then I realized a while ago that Beethoven dedicated pieces to counts, nobility, and countesses. Everyone knows the famous Moonlight Sonata. That's dedicated to a woman called Countess Juliette Guicciardi, a very famous woman that Beethoven dedicated this famous piece to. So he dedicated pieces to counts and countesses and even his accountant. How do you like that? I was very proud of myself when I realized that. Now, I can't say that except in English, because I go around the world and I can't say accountant. It doesn't sound the same. The word's not the same accountant as accountant, accountess in German or in Croatian, where I was in Croatia. So only in English can I use that little alliteration. How's that? So this is the final piece. 5 minutes, we're done. And the famous Turkish March by Beethoven. Thank you. Please be seated. Just for a minute, just before the pastor comes up, give me just 1 second. Just very briefly, anybody have a question like to ask me? My life, my music, my social security number, anything? Anybody have a question? Sometimes in an intimate group like this, if anyone has a question about anything you'd like to know. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, Beethoven was very specific in notating in the music of getting louder here, playing this at this speed, doing this. So there's all this, what's called explicit writing. He wrote music and he really marked things that to know what they mean and things. And of course, then that's how you spend 10 hours a day. I now practice 7 hours a day. I mean, that's how you spend time to really integrate this and the feeling of it and what he wanted. And you know, that's the power of what's in the music. I remember my teacher at Juilliard once said, you know, he said, I heard Beethoven play. And I said, what? I heard Beethoven play this piece. I said, oh, well, I don't understand. What do you mean? And he started pointing at what Beethoven marked in the music. He says, I know exactly how it sounds. Here it is. Here it is. I mean, that's the genius of his music. He takes ink, puts dots and dashes, and 250 years later, I'm crying because it's unbelievably beautiful. That's the power of this, you know. So, yes, sir.
How many languages do you speak?
Well, I speak German. I speak some French, Russian, Hebrew. You know, I mean, some. I mean, it's been years since I've been able to use it. I haven't been in the synagogue for many years and stuff. But my parents, my father spoke Russian and Romanian and Hebrew, and my mother spoke Hebrew and Hungarian, but the language they both had together was German. So my father didn't have to learn Hungarian or Slovak, and my mother didn't have to learn Russian or Romanian, so the common language was German, and that's what we spoke in the house. So that's how I, you know, that's what I speak. Yes, sir.
Sam, you mentioned after receiving the Lord, did any of your classmates, you mentioned that you're Jewish students there, did any of them receive the testimony?
They did.
And any of your family? You mentioned you have a brother and a sister.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you first very briefly, and I'll lose that last question because I know there was a reception afterwards. No, it's good. So let me first of all share with my parents. I went and shared with my parents, and I knew it'd be very difficult. I mean, I knew this was going to be very difficult. My father's father died because he was Jewish, and now this son believes in this Jesus. So I shared with my parents, and my father told me 3 things. You're no longer my son. I never want to hear from you again, and as far as I'm concerned, you're dead. I knew it'd be traumatic. I didn't know in what way. I did not hear from my parents for many years. They didn't come to my wedding. I didn't hear from them. And then I began to have a relationship. You know, in 1995 then, my father became very ill. He was almost 90, 89. He was born in 1905. I wanted to visit him in the hospital, and he refused to see me. He died 4 days later, and he did not want me at the funeral, which I respected. So I live in Mesa. My mother lived in Scottsdale, which is, you know, that's a very Jewish community. So 2 things about my mother. My mother loved classical music. I'm in classical music because of my mother. Everybody should listen to your mother. Even if you're 90 years old and you're here, listen to your mother. No. No. And the second thing is, all of my mother's family escaped the Holocaust. Barely. But my father lost his family. My mother's family escaped. My mother wanted to reach out to me, but it was too traumatic for my father. With the passing of my father, I had a great relationship with my mother, really. She loved my wife. She loved our kids. I mean, we lived 30 minutes away. I saw her. I gave concerts for her. Every 6 months, I played concerts for my mother. I began to read the New Testament to her. I began to share with her. She went to the synagogue. Every Saturday when I spoke to her, I said, what did the rabbi talk about? I always brought it up. What did the rabbi talk about? And then more and more, she began to listen. And on February the 12th, 2007, my 91-year-old mother came to faith in Jesus Christ. 91 years. It was absolutely, I'll never forget it. February the... And She's gone to be with the Lord, and I spoke at her funeral. And I said, Mother, you're now in the bosom of Father Abraham. You know, that's in Matthew's gospel written to the Jews, because to a Jew, heaven is being in the bosom of Father Abraham. That's a very common expression of Jews being of Abraham, you know. So let me just share with you, I shared with a lot of people at Juilliard. I'll just tell you one story, and then, you know, there's been others. About 4 years ago, I got a call from a pastor in Hawaii. So I've done concerts in Hawaii, and he knows me quite well. And in Hawaii, they get a lot of visitors. You know what I mean? You know, people come there for vacation, and if you're a believer, you go to a church. If you know. And this man said, we had a visitor in our church yesterday. And he said his name was so-and-so. It didn't ring a bell. And he said, what do you do? He said, oh, I'm a pianist. Oh, really? Yeah. He said, yeah. Where'd you go to school? He said, I went to Juilliard. And he said, well, I know a friend. He's done concerts for me here in Hawaii. His name is Sam Rotman. He said, Sam Rotman shared the gospel with me. And he never knew this, but 3 years later, I gave my life to Christ. I mean, he went on and on. I won't go into more detail. But so I got his number, and we spoke for 3 hours. And he said to me, well, Sam, now you can see what God does with a seed that you planted 46 years ago. It was unbelievable. His wife is a Christian. His family is a Christian. They worship. They lead worship. He plays piano in the church. I knew none of this. I knew, because I left, it was in 76, and I left in 73. But he was a student at Juilliard still, and I witnessed him in 73. So you never know. You plant the seed. You plant the seed. Let me just share. I'm in the lobby. I'll be also at the reception. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
One very, very quick question.
Yeah.
My mother and I want to know, at what age did you start playing the piano?
Yeah, so I started when I was 9 years old, which is sometimes a little late. A good age is 7 or 8, you know. But I started when I was 9. But my point is that my mother took me to concerts when I was 6 years old. She loved classical music. And so I would go and hear orchestras play and violin, and, you know, but she never really pushed it on me. But I started when I was 9, and I was not special. I mean, I was not a prodigy. I just realized that the more I practiced, the better I got. So if I practiced for 15 minutes, I could play. But if I practiced for 30 minutes, I could really play this. No, really. It was just work. And when I was 11, I wanted to be a concert pianist. So, I mean, that was a very important moment. I can see it right now. I was 11 years old, and I remember saying, I want to be a concert pianist when I grow up. And then I began to practice 2 hours and 2.5 and 3 hours and 5 hours. And in high school, I was practicing 7 hours a day, 8 hours a day. But at Juilliard, I was practicing 10 hours a day from the first day. I didn't have to take biology, physics, PE, you know, wrestling, or, you know, I mean, all of this stuff. No, it was music, and all I did was just study music. Let me just mention, in the lobby, I have some recordings, and I'll be done. One recording is my testimony. It's a DVD of everything I shared here, and I planned it as well. It was produced by Jews for Jesus. So it's my whole testimony. Another recording is all Beethoven, my favorite recording. It has the Moonlight Sonata, 5 major works by Beethoven. Another recording is Debussy, French composer. He wrote Clair de Lune. Very delicate. All the stress goes out of you. You'll be a puddle of water in the living room. And then the 4th recording is Russian music. You know what happens when you listen to Russian music? All the stress goes back into you. It's literally 80,000 notes of music on this recording. I mean, Russian music is really emotional and powerful. So there's all Russian, all French, all Beethoven, or in my testimony. They're $15 each. There's no tax. The autograph is free. And about 30 years ago, about 25 years ago, I gave a concert in Green Valley. And tonight, I said to them, tonight the autograph is $15 and the CD is free. And a man came up to me afterward and said, I like a CD with no autograph. I will not tell you what I said to him. No, I will not tell you what I... So, well, this has been a joy. I hope you enjoyed the concert. I hope my story really is taken to your heart. I'll be in the back, and the pastor, now you can come on up here, and I'll play for the offering. And thank you so much for coming. God bless you.
Thank you, Sam, very, very much for sharing your gifts and your life and calling us to think about the Lord. We are going to take an offering. Whatever you put in there goes directly to Sam. Please don't write any checks out to the church, okay? Write them, if you have a check, just write it to Sam Rotman, okay? And I want to acknowledge our two dear young lady coordinators, Alyssa Short and Alexis Lefew. They did all the coordination for this thing and the emails and all of that. And I'm just, I turned it over to them and I just forgot about it. So praise the Lord. So Sam's going to play for us while our men come and receive your offering.